assuming I gave this person a number or a business card, but I'm not sure who it is. And then I didn't want to.
Google seems to be rebelling against me.
How are you?
How's it going?
Good. I thought you were joining online?
No.
No. Okay.
I can text you though, but I meant to say in person.
Oh, okay. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Did
And I just sent a
I came in like an hour ahead of time to kind of get everything ready. Yeah, let's grab some more.
Smooth jazz. I like jazz.
How you doing, Patrick? Good. Welcome back. You guys want anything to drink?
I got this.
There is water. I can. So we don't have any fridge water. We're not that fancy. We do have the fridge thing. I can show you. Okay. All right. Hey, thanks, Austin. See ya. Hello, Ben. Rocking long sleeve. Sorry, Patrick, you didn't get the. You didn't get the. Next time. We should make sure our audio's gonna be good for online. Yeah, those pesky online people, you know, all this. No. Not typically.
We should build a bot to go out and post their stats and then publish them.
I don't think there really is much worth publishing.
No, but that's the point. It's like, this is how many hours I spend on making this available to you, to people.
A lot of you probably not really into it. Yeah, you'll have to do the caption and all that.
Or you could upload a different video and see how many complaints you get. That's another way of figuring out who's actually watching.
Yeah, post a bunch of visual basics of it.
I think I've got a rip of Barbie.
That would get me crying real quick.
It was both better and worse than advertised.
No, I haven't seen it. The only way I would be an event to see that is if I was in an environment that had a plane and I had no way to escape.
For He-Man?
Cartoon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so He-Man the cartoon was a vehicle to sell you comics and toys.
Correct.
That was the intended goal in it.
Yeah.
The Barbie movie
Test, test, test.
It's one of those movies that's built to be pulled apart and used as memes and segments.
Is that it was memes by design?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think that they understood that that's what they were making.
Oh,
But that's what it ends up being, is because everything is built in like
because I'm pretty sure every frame of Star Wars has been used now. So
pretty
they
much.
should move on to a new.
Oh.
But even then though, like
Your He-Man conversation is live on me.
even with the newer Star Wars though, they run these longer plots, and so like if you remember movies from the 50s, just like westerns, like so bottom of the barrel.
Although we have a solid foundation.
Alright.
Yeah.
Close
Yeah,
this.
same here. Yeah, like have your resume kind of tweak and get it.
That.
That stuff. Yeah.
Yes. This. Alright. Oh, that's not it. That. There we go. Alright, welcome everybody. Good to see everyone back again. This should change in just a second for our internet humans. Welcome to the Python user group. I think everyone in person has been here before, but in case there's anyone watching this online who hasn't, yeah, this is the Spokane Python user group. We meet once a month, but I'll get to that in just a sec. Tonight we've got David presenting again. Very excited for that. Django 201. So we had a kind of intro Django presentation a couple months ago. So David's going to build on that. Let me go next slide. So Spokane Python user group, we're part of the overall Spokane tech group, which is currently the .NET users group or C#, DevOps users group, and then the Python users group. Maybe we'll have the Go user group soon. I don't know. I gotta talk with Sean.
Seth.
Sorry, Seth, if you're watching, but you're probably not because you're busy doing Go stuff. But maybe we'll have another Infinity Stone soon. We'll see. All right, thank you. So this meetup is sponsored by Intelitech. The building you're in, and they provide us all the equipment and everything, so thanks Intelitech. I believe they're still looking for someone on the marketing team, if you know anyone. So the .NET users group, next meetup, TBD. Python user group, we meet on the first Monday morning of every month. So the next first Monday will be September 4th, which is actually a holiday now that I think about it. So we'll probably end up doing the Monday after that. So I'll update that. When I was writing these slides, I didn't think about that. That may be an intro to doing C Python development. I need to get in touch with Michael, I believe, who did a Lightning presentation last month. And he had offered to do a presentation in September, but I'll follow up on that. And then finally, we've got the Azure, or the DevOps users group, which they're doing lunch and learns at noon on the 4th Tuesday of the month. So this month will be Azure Monitor, which is an Azure resource. So Phil Spokus will be going over that, who is the IntelliTech C something, I don't know, VP of C-level activities and stuff. I don't know. All right, David, take it away.
Take it away. All right. Do you need to switch the thing?
Yes.
All right.
Wow.
Look how smooth that is now.
So smooth. Is it? That's you? We're good.
That's me. As long as we're also meet online. Okay. Sweet. So yeah, welcome to Django 201. I think pretty much everyone was here for Joe's, no, -1. Almost everyone was here for Joe's 101 that we did a while back. So I'll do a quick recap, go through a couple slides, but we mostly want to spend time actually in code and building things. Joe named this rapid building, so we're going to try to build rapidly. And as I'm going through rapidly, if it is too rapid, please wave your hands or let me know, and we'll slow down a little bit and make sure that the concepts that we're covering are understandable. So keep it interactive. That said, if anyone does want to code along, you're definitely welcome to. And if not, then we'll keep everything up on GitHub that you can reference later. So just a quick review of Django. Like, what is it? It's a Python-based web framework used for making web applications. It's used a lot for any kind of like web type stuff. So GUIs, front end, APIs, whatnot. It's very commonplace to see a Django backend with like really robust APIs and some kind of JavaScript front end, although Django can be completely used full stack with everything. I don't know if there's any like JavaScript people here if I want to like bash on JavaScript a little bit, but yeah, in a lot of cases you might not even need that, but it is a very common paradigm in today's world to have like a Django backend with REST APIs and like a React or Angular front end. So who uses Django? Lots of big name companies you've probably heard of, like Instagram. YouTube is on there for some reason, so I got this from like the Django book. Udemy, Dropbox, Pinterest. Tons of like big name, like household name companies use Django for their products. So why use Django? I'm not going to read through all this. I literally typed into Bard just to give that a shot to say why use Django, and this is what it came up with. So I thought some of it was pretty good, so I'll just like mention a couple things in purple there that are highlighted: speed, security, scalability, easy to use, active community, well documented. If you ever want to know more, maybe ask your favorite AI chatbot, like why use Django or why is Django awesome, and it'll probably come up with like a lot of awesome reasons like this. So as Joe covered last time, Django is something that's known as like batteries included, which means you get a lot of stuff out of the box. Like if you've used other Python-based web frameworks, I'll use frameworks in web quotes or in quotes like Flask or Fast API. Some of these, you know, they're very, very simple, and to do more stuff with it always requires like more add-ons and more things that are not necessarily Flask specific. Like you can make an API with like one file and like one route, and it's very, very basic. But if you want to get a database and authentication and all these things, then you have to add more and more stuff. So Django has a lot of that included that will work without having to do much configuration at all, even though all these different things are actually configurable and optional. So they have things like site management, templating, admin page, messaging, middleware, sessions, built-in test framework, ORM, which is one of the most important things for your database connection, logging, management signals, like all this stuff. And of course, it also has a very, very extensive third-party community and packages available. There's a website called djangopackages.org, I think, that if there's anything you need, you type it in there, you'll probably find all kinds of stuff. So like every authentication backend you can possibly think of, there's something there. Just for example, there's multiple ways to do APIs. You can change out templating languages. Like if you don't want their ORM, you could use a different ORM. So all kinds of stuff, and everything is completely configurable and extensible. So that said, just a recap of how to do things. Joe did go over this last time, right? Went through all these steps. Pip install it. It comes with a command Django admin to start a project. Django kind of follows a paradigm of you create a product or a project, and then you have apps underneath. So you create that initial project, go in there, and then you can like start an app, and then you do a migration to create your database, and you can run server, and you have a working website. That's like the core base steps. You do that, you'll have a working thing that you can see. Of course, that doesn't get you much because you probably, or if you think about using Django, you probably think about using some kind of data, and you want APIs and all kinds of stuff, and we'll go through that today. So the main components, just to be aware of, is first of all models. So models are your Python representation of an actual database table, and you can work with rows in your database as Python objects. So you can do a lot of stuff with that. We'll go through creation of some simple models. Views are the part that handles requests and responses. So when you want to like render an output, for example, whether it be text or HTML or JSON or CSV or whatever, is the view that handles that. And templates are typically the things that hold all of your typical web stuff, right? Your CSS, your HTML, JavaScript, anything like that. Django has a Jinja 2-like templating engine built in. I say Jinja 2-like because it's almost Jinja, just minus a couple things, but that's also something that you can configure out if you want to use Jinja or Tito or some other templating language. And of course, URLs. So URLs are the things that map your endpoint to a view. So think about the thing you actually type into your web browser in your address bar. That's like the URL, and that typically gets mapped to a view to render some kind of outputs. And lastly, and although there are other components, is like the settings file. So there's one settings file per Django project, and that holds all of your project level configuration. And we'll look at an example of that, but that holds all kinds of everything: logging settings, auth settings, if you have add-ons like DRF, caching, middlewares, all kinds of stuff, it all lives in settings. So that said, just so you have a little bit of a visual of how things work, if you type in your address bar, some URL, that gets as a request forwarded to the views. The views are probably going to do something meaningful, like look up data in your database, and then display that output based on a template, which is again your HTML or your CSS, and then give a response back to the client or the thing doing the request. So that's all I have for really like an intro or a example of some of the components. If you want more, definitely go back to the Django 101 from a couple months ago. There's a lot of good stuff in there. So the things that we'll be coding today, I'm going to try to make sure this doesn't get too complicated. So we're going to use a repo template, a project template, and an app template. These are all things that are live on GitHub right now under a organization that I have set up called Django Addicts. And I will publish code to my own GitHub under like Spug with today's date in case anyone wants to utilize that. And I might borrow or steal some code from an existing project that I have set up to be a future like example type demo thing, and we might reference that a little bit. So in the end, I have some links to some good stuff. One, like the Django book, where that first some quotes came from. They have all of these are really great documentation things. Django project has great documentation. The DjangoBook.com has very simplified documentation. So if you're just getting started and don't know a lot of things, that's a great resource because it keeps things really simple and really basic. So that said, let's code some stuff. So I'm going to start here in my GitHub Django Addicts. I have a number of things in here. So I'm going to start with like a repo template. So if you're around for the lightning talks or the last time we talked about GitHub type stuff, we talked about templates. So I'm going to use this template to create a new repo because it has stuff and structure in there that I already want to use. It's not a Django thing. It's not even a Python thing. It's like a GitHub thing. So I'm going to create a new repository here. And I'm going to put that under Spug and 2023-08, so today's the 15th, right? and I'll just say like demo for Spug.
32 instead of 22.
Oh, wow, okay, future. 23, all right, I did it again. Okay, I can't type. Wait, so 50. And that'll be public in case you want to look at that. So let's take a moment to create, and then we'll just clone just like any other repo, but I'll walk through the structure as well. So I'm going to clone this locally, and we'll fork everything locally. I won't make any new VS Code.
Terminus you're using?
Yeah.
So is that like a tiler?
No, it's a terminal program.
Okay, just a shell.
Yeah, it's just a shell.
You can have SSH conditions and stuff.
Yeah,
I thought it was
it's
like an iPad program called Terminus.
it used to be really good. I have an old version. Then it got less good. Like I don't want to get the new version because it turned into one of these things. Oh, set up your web account. You can't use your damn terminal unless you have a connection to like online and
Oh, their thing.
yeah. But as like a terminal, especially for Windows, it's one of the nicer ones that I found. So and that works with like Linux and with Mac as well. So if like you're in like a multi-tenancy type thing, it's really nice to have like the same terminal experience like between all your machines. So anyway, that's why I was using it. I just won't recommend it anymore. It's the new version is not as good. Okay, so this created our repo. So what you'll see here is we're going to have like a README, a TOML file, ANV's directory, which I'll get to in a minute, and of course our GitHub stuff. So this is like just actions for all your code quality type things. We won't spend a lot of time in here, so I do want to set up. Let me add a terminal. I'll just use this one inside VS Code, so I don't have to change windows. Projects, Spug. So the first thing I want to do is create a virtual environment so I can install all the things. And all the things I want to install are defined inside the TOML file. So I will do Python, balance M, VENV. So I'm just using all the built-in Python stuff, no poetry, no flit, no conda or any of that gobbledygook. I personally just like simple standards, so I will do that. Of course, if you are a fan of like Conda or Poetry, there's like UW, and I will activate it. And activate, and we'll just do a pip install. And I'm going to do a .dev just to get all my dev things. If I look in the TOML file, for example, all the main dependencies are under dependencies, and I also have a additional dependencies for like all the code quality stuff, PyTest and rough and whatnot.
Template you made that you're pulling in, that you're editing?
No, we're not editing anything yet.
All right, I feel. Oh, you created these. All
Yeah,
right, never mind.
we are just installing our
I'm
Python
getting ahead of
dependencies. Yeah, I know you're excited. I like it. But right now we're just installing stuff.
When I run that pip install, it was a dot dev in brackets.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen that syntax before, and it doesn't work for me.
Really?
Is that like looking at the PyProject.toml?
Yes.
To pip? Interesting. Do
It
you have to have like a special? Well, you said you just
No, I mean, yeah, this was also from a brand new, like, fresh virtual environment. This is the same way if you ever use like a setup.cfg and have dependencies defined in there.
I think it was Z shell.
Okay, so there's the command. If you need to see it again, it's just pip install dots and then bracket dev.
I think Z shell was interpreting the dot and then the brackets as something special, so I put it in quotes and it worked.
Okay, cool. Sorry. No, it's all good. So it'll be one
More
more
of a
wait a
bash
second
guy.
for you to.
Following along.
No, I feel you. I'm on bash here now, and yeah, I have Z shell for my work computer, but they use Poetry, so and I'm using PyEnv because that's what they use. And I don't know, I guess I've never had to install it like this. Okay.
Run both.
What's that?
Be cool, run both.
Run both? You can. I mean, have you used PyEnv? I mean, that's a great thing to if you need to support like multiple Python versions. it's more overhead and stuff. But again, I like the simple built-in and standards. All right, Joe, how's it look?
There's a lot of stuff. We've got
Yeah.
pandas, pi arrow.
Yes, so
NumPy.
that's one of the things that when you work from a template, it has all the dependencies and dependencies, so you have everything you need like out of the box. So that's why your, I guess, pip install is taking a while.
I think it's pretty much done.
Okay, so if you remember from the Python 101, I'm just going to copy a couple commands here, and Joe will make sure that you can see this. We start with a Django command, and this is cut off one, to Django admin start project. So I'm just going to do start project Spug. So if you ever started a Django project, just like we saw with like Django 101, you basically stop there. What we're doing differently this time is I have a Django project templates available in GitHub that has additional things and different layout than what's the defaults for that. And we'll go through so you can see what's going on there. Interestingly enough, using a Django project template or Django app template works great if you have something on your local computer. It also works great if you have a local zip file. I had hoped to create a repo of various templates that work for different things just as zip files, and when I tried to like just download those directly from the or use this command directly with reference to those, it totally barfed, like something was wrong with the zip, was corrupt, it didn't download or unpack correctly. But this works, so you'll see it. Unfortunately, you have to kind of go to like the archive and get the zip from there. Like if you ever downloaded a zip from GitHub, it's basically that same link. So it's a little bit awkward, but to still create all the stuff that we want to have for doing rapid development. Right. So what we'll see is this did create a project here called Spug, and this has a number of things in it already, including like a tests folder, our manage.py file. Inside tests, I have some different subfolders for regression, units, integration, and core is where most of our stuff lives. So this gives us a base templates, a couple other things in here that we'll look at later, some other templates to use, a very extensive settings file. Let me open that. So there's all kinds of stuff in here that we will want, and these are all things that I just typically use over and over and over again. That's really the value of a template, is to have something so you have that boilerplate already, so you don't have to start from scratch every time you do another project.
Do you rip out after you start running with your template? Do you go back and then like, okay, well I didn't need these once you reach 80% project completion?
For the most part, no. I haven't used templates a whole lot. It's something that I wanted to use more just for like, the rapid part of the rapid developments. So all of these are core things that I use over and over again. So I haven't ripped anything out yet. If anything, I've only added stuff in.
Sorry, I don't mean to the actual template.
Yeah, but you mean the project that's created from the template.
Right.
So yeah, no.
Okay.
I haven't. I would like to say the intent would be to keep the templates really, really base, as light as possible, but make it additive. You should add things to it, right?
Yeah.
But stuff that's in there, I do over and over again. So it's so far worked for me. Obviously, if you're in a different organization, you have different needs. You want different things. Like there'll be some templates, actual Django templates, meaning HTML that. I'm not the best front-end person. You'll look at it, okay, it's a passable thing, but someone who is much better at front-end might want a whole different templating system. I use Bootstrap, maybe you're a Tailwind or like an Uno type person, or you don't care about any of that. There's stuff in here that I use, so that's what I built in, and hopefully this will be a good example of sort of somebody who's trying to get started and wants to actually see stuff happen, versus struggling through like how to get like the templates and the variables and all that kind of stuff exactly right. So we have settings. I have a couple views set up, ready to go, and of course just the normal like Django boilerplate like you're whisking here in your ASGI. So I think I will go through the settings file a little bit. So just if you're not familiar with it, and don't let this overburden you, by the way, there's a ton of stuff in here. It sets like some environment things. It sets like security keys. There's installed apps. These are all like Django apps, like auth and like sessions and static management are all things that are built in. You'll see that I have a number of third-party things. These are all 100% optional, just stuff that I use over and over again. So I put it in there, and when we create a local app, we'll have a project app there. There's a number of middlewares I actually use as well. Again, a couple of Django backend or built-ins and several just third-party templates set up, ready to go. Database settings, we're just going to use like SQLite, but if, for example, you want to use Postgres, MySQL, this is where you put the settings for that. Authentication validators, some more static Finder type things, some log settings, the actual logging settings to create log files. You can create like one log file, or you can have multiple log files. I like to break them up into different things. REST framework stuff, if you're not using REST framework, you won't have any of this, but I think one of the things that people would really want to use this for is to see how APIs work, so I'm going to use DRF for that, and that all those settings are here, and a couple other beauties that are in there. So don't worry too much about what all those are, just know that there's a lot of stuff, and all those things are typically managed through your settings file. All right, so now that we have all these things ready to go.
I think you're missing a D on coveralls.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, what is? No, something completely got borked. Well, I don't think we'll need to use the TOML file again. I probably just miscopied something. I don't know, somewhere I clicked wrong and okay. So we have all these things that are ready to go. So if I do a actually, one thing I do want to say, when you create a Django project, it creates this folder with all this stuff based on the name of the project you gave it. In this case, I gave it Spug. That's not the actual name that I want, so I'm going to go ahead and manually rename that. So I'm going to just move Spug to Django _ projects. And the reason I do that is because in my repo, from a repo point of view, you might normally have a lot of other stuff here. And I want all the Django stuff under a Django folder that is very well defined. Other things that might go in here at some point is like, if you're using Docker, you might have a Docker file. You might have some Compose stuff or Podman type stuff. If you are running not just in the Django demo server, like in real world, when you might have like an Nginx config, some other stuff like that. So because of that, I like to keep all of the Django things in its own folder. So it's just a convention I use. And if, like for example, I've got my code quality stuff, this is all going to be defaulted to run in that folder as well. So hopefully that makes sense. And then underneath there we have core and like all those other things we talked about. So most of everything we're going to do is going to be under that folder. Let me go back and say one thing as well. I also have this like envs file. I think, Joe, you talked about like envs a little bit on the Lightning talks last time. So kind of the same thing here, where there's a number of environment variables that I want to use that gets typically in deployment will get forwarded into settings. So I'm going to create that here and just make a local env file for what we're running locally. I'm just going to call it env.local. So do you guys typically use like a similar type thing when you need env vars? No?
I don't use them.
Oh, at all? Okay. Gotcha. And I'm going to put one thing in here. So I saw all this, or showed you all those settings files. One of those things, oops, wow, that totally didn't work. So this is, why is copy and pasting failing me now? Well, one of those things that I want to set here is like a log path, so we can actually see some logs. Why is that not?
You have to highlight the whole line in Notepad.
I am completely incapable of like copy and pasting. Okay, there we go. So what I'm doing here is basically setting an env variable called log path that the settings file will consume, and then it will write logs in this folder. So again, this will totally work even if you don't do that. I just want to do that so I can show you that. Right now we don't have any log path or anything in there, but we will create it as soon as we start doing some Django stuff. So now that I'm in my Django project folder, I can do a migrate, which is the command that goes through and creates the database based on all the configuration in your apps. So I'll do that real quick, and you'll see all these different things that we're using. And just like I was saying before, we do have a Django logs folder that got created because it's defined in the settings file. So that'll be used there. And we also have like an SQLite database that's ready to go. So now that we have that, we should be able to actually run a thing. If you remember from Django 101, there's a local command called run server, which will run a demo server locally that will actually start like a website that you can go and do stuff. So we will, oops, if I type it right. There we go. So we'll see that web server started, and if I'm just curious enough, you could go and see that there's logs going inside our logs folder. So I'm going to go ahead and go to this location, and you can say, oh, we have a thing. So like a little bit more than we normally get just out of the box. So this is just a simple bootstrap templates that we can use to like log in and do some other stuff there. So I did forget or skip one step, and that's where we need to create a user. So some entity that can actually log into that. So Django does provide a command for that called like create super user. I'm going to use another one that I've created in one of the third-party packages called add super user, and it also takes a parameter for groups. So I'm going to show you a really simple. God, I can't see if my screen's cut off here. It is. So group equals admin. So what this is going to do is create an admin user with the name admin and the password admin and the group admin.
They'll never get it.
They'll never get it. You'll never be able to guess that, right? Now I'm going to do one more command, just called add user, and this is going to create just a user with the name user and the password user. And the reason that I do that is because with like Django authentication, it does have a user table and a groups table, and you can use that for like RBAC type control, and I will show you a very simple example of that. So now if I run server again, I can go here and I can actually log in with that admin user that I created, admin, and we can see that we have some stuff for free. So just a simple little layout. I can have a dashboard page that literally has nothing, but the template is there that we can put stuff into. We have APIs through the Django REST framework interface, and I have just a simple link to my Django admin page. If, for example, and there's some other stuff here that I will walk through in a second. If I log in with user, just user, you'll see that I only have two things that I can click in because that access to admin is only available to admins. So since we created an admin group with the admin user in that, only people who are in the admin group can actually go and access that piece. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to log in as my admin user. Get a couple other things for free. Although the ref interface is great, a lot of the world uses Swagger. So there's a Swagger interface here that's like set up and ready to go. We haven't done any APIs yet, but that's ready. We also have Redoc if you're into that. I have a simple little like about type page here that shows service uptime, and you can like pass in through like environment variables or overriding settings what you want this to be. Say, hey, my app is a blah 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 that does some kind of thing. Recently, I created a Pigwalker interface. If you don't know what that is, it's like a Tableau type thing, except open source and for Python. So I just like do that in here. So if you want to see like do some data analytics, you can put it in a CSV file and do some other stuff there. Another package that I have is for just host management, so you can go and see some things about your host, including like what processes are running, like what network is running, stuff like that. Like if I want to see, in this case it's running on my laptop, but if I want to see like what processes are here, I can go and say, oh, hey, this thing is running, it's been launched on here by this person, blah blah blah. And I have some like user control stuff where a user's gonna have a profile, including things that you might need, like your API token to do calls like through a REST API. So all that is built in basically from the templates and from the third-party packages that were included in that installed apps. So all this is ready to go. And then again, this is just stuff that I use over and over again. Several actual functioning apps that I've made for companies before look like this and have these types of things in it. This is just a way to get it going much, much faster and in a much more consistent way.
This is open source, right?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, all these are open source. So you can do, I mean, if you look over at Joe's computer right there, he's following along. He's got like a super awesome looking thing going in. Yeah.
Well, okay, no,
I forgot to add super user, so I can't see my host metrics.
Oh, it's okay. Oh, I didn't realize that I getted that by super user.
One question I had was, and forgive me if you answered this already, but I was trying to type. I noticed you don't override, or you don't add your own custom user model anywhere. Was that one of your third-party packages doing that? Or are you not doing it?
So right now I'm not doing that. There is a third-party package called user extensions, which basically gives you all this stuff. So you get a profile, you get service accounts, all those things. It would work whether you're overriding the default user model or not. Basically what this one does is create a one-to-one from the existing user model. I mean, it's good enough, so I didn't really feel like I needed to, but it's probably something I should add in because I know a lot of people do that. So if you look in the admin panel, for example, you'll see this user extension, so you get all of these things, like your one of the things, like you can rotate your token, you can set a theme, it has like a list of like favorites and recents and a number of preferences like time zones and stuff like that.
So would that favorites be like a generic relationship? Like, or what is user favoriting? Is
So
it
user favoriting is say like, hey, I really like this dashboard page. I can go here and say add this as a favorites, and then my user has a list of those, and you can like name it or change it, and maybe you just want to go there.
so it's for like views
Yeah.
or URLs?
Yeah, it's basically for URL. So it can be really useful, especially when you have filters in your URL. So like, hey, I have like, you know, a database of things, and I want to see like a filtered list of that. You can click that button and like have a direct link to your
If
filtered
you're going
list
in
of
once a
things.
day to check on the same most recent data, something
Yeah.
like that.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Is
so
that
again,
using Pigwalker?
No.
Pigwalker?
No.
I forget what it was, but I know you talked about it before.
I talked about Pigwalker before. That one's like super new.
I thought you mentioned it. to
I
Lightning
can talk
Talks.
about it.
Sorry, I don't know.
I heard Pigwalker.
Yeah, I mentioned that at coffee
Oh,
last
maybe
time.
that's where it was.
So yeah, we had a new member, Steven, who was doing some like data analytic type stuff. So that
Yeah.
kind of triggered that. Well, Ben, you do that too, right? A lot of
Not with that. I had not heard of it before you mentioned it in coffee.
Oh,
I saw it was a requirement in your.
I
project.
did. So that is a requirement. I thought it was cool. I want to make more views about that so you can automatically get stuff from your database into it. And let me just show you this real quick since we're on it. So this is probably normally not the way you would use it, but this is the way that's kind of set up to use. Like all the examples I've seen have been mostly like through Jupyter notebooks. And I think I've seen you stream that example where it's like, okay, take this CSV file of stuff, and then you have this interface. So I can do that. That's why I created like this little interface, just so that it's super easy to do. But my intent is to use it with like Django query set, so you're actually pulling stuff from the database. And basically you have this view. So you wouldn't like select a file. You just like, you know, select the query. So I don't know if we'll get to that today, but maybe I'll show you that later. So right now I'm just uploading a sample data or sample CSV that I had like ChatGPT generate. And this is just like a list of people of a certain age in a certain city with a certain salary. So that's the data, and this like interface shows it for you. So if you wanted to do something like, hey, let me put like the salary on X axis and like the city on Y axis, it'll show you like a little graph of that, and I guess you can like, you know, do stuff like that. And it's supposed to be like a Tableau type alternative, and if you want to change colors, I can put Tableau in here. And that does all this stuff. I haven't even played with it that much. I just saw that literally like one of the YouTubers that like I watch on a regular basis, like, hey, this Pigwalker things, and lots of the comments were like, hey, does this work with Django? And there was nothing to make it work with Django, so I'm like, okay, I want to make it work with Django. So then this came up.
So you made the Django version.
Yes.
of
Well, it's not the Django
for-
version. So this was designed to work with pandas. So it basically takes a CSV file, you know, and again, I don't want to. It's not an uncommon practice. You have something, you know, like your database backend or Django or not, pull data out, put it in a CSV, take that CSV, put it into another program, and then do your data visualization for like analysis. And that just seems like, okay, well, I don't want to do that. I already have the data in my system, a system like this. I'm going to create a button up here somewhere that just says, show me the Pigwalker interface, and it'll also be pre-populated based on like a you know, a query set.
All right, so are you saving, in this case, that CSV file, like your media directory? Or
No, this is just on the computer.
Okay, gotcha. So you just upload the file and then just use it, but if you like refresh the page, you
If
have to
I
re-upload it.
refresh, it's gone. It exists
Gotcha.
for like the duration of the page.
Gotcha.
And well, that's how it's supposed to work anyway. Yeah, so if I refresh like this way, then it's just gone.
Okay.
I know, but it's a cool thing. It seems to be getting like a lot of like momentum. I think there's a
How
lot
many
of.
stars does it have?
How many stars does it have? I don't know, Joe. How many stars does it have?
7K.
So it's not bad for something that's a couple months old.
What's your minimum before you'll use it?
You got a lot of data analysis in your Discord hacking? No?
I don't put that stuff on GitHub, I would get banned.
All right. Smart.
I got a lot of failing workflows when I created the from the template.
Gotcha. Yeah, anyway, I guess a lot of people feel they need Tableau but don't like Tableau and want alternatives, so that's...
Tableau's expensive and it sucks. Other than that, it's great.
Yeah. I feel you. Okay, cool. Let's do some more stuff.
That's only 2 down.
This one.
Everything else is great.
Everything else is great, yeah. So, sweet. So we created a project. Now what we want to do is create an app. So if you remember again from Django 101, there's a simple command to create an app just called start app. We're going to do the same thing again, just like we did with project, except we're going to use a templates. And yeah,
Just one.
let's call it app one. You can call it whatever you want.
You go with app 2.
A rebel.
Pressed right upside the glass.
Sorry. I'm holding it up. I'm typing so fast.
These Mac users, they just gotta be different.
I'm typing fine. I just can't.
Think like the side of the box.
Yeah.
What's that commercial from like the 70s or it's like the 1984 Apple commercial where the lady runs in with the sledgehammer
Yeah.
and like breaks the
Famous
glass?
one, yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm doing right
That's-
here.
We're seeing it replayed
Okay,
right here.
so while Joe is typing, I'm just gonna go ahead and do another app, just with start app. I'll call it app 0, just so we can see like the difference of those. So if I look at app 0 up here, you'll see that, and these are all the Django default things. You get migrations because you need something to track your database. You get like an empty admin. You get an apps directory. You get a model. To put your models in, you get a test that we're not going to use because I like to have tests in a different location, and you have like an empty views. So that's all well and good, but I typically have much more stuff than that. So in app 1 that used our template, you'll see that we have much more stuff than that. So we have, of course, migrations. We have templates, which really does not make sense to me, like why Django doesn't include that in the default. We have URLs. Again, I don't know why I don't include that in the default. Typically, you'll see a urls.py file. I like to put those in a URLs folder so I can have some separation between different things. Like I can put all my GUI stuff separate than my API stuff, for example, and sometimes I divide this out even further. So it's nice to have that just for like file separation. Same thing with views. You could have just like one views.py that has like all your stuff. I like to break that out into like more sensible things. I got an admin, got an apps, I have filter sets, forms, models, serializers, and signals. We won't be using signals here, but just know that those definitely exist. We will, assuming we have time to get into DRF stuff, use filter sets and serializers and all of that. Let me pause there to see if there's any questions or if Joe, you need to catch up.
I'm good.
You good? All right, sweet. So next, and this is where you're going to have to go really, really fast.
Sorry, you can leave me in the dust. Don't let me hold up your talk.
So let me, give you this. So I mentioned in the slides I'm going to steal some code. So I have this project and it's going to be like a demo project of like how to use some stuff. I want to use it for like tutorials and like how-tos and like honestly as a reference to copy and paste stuff from when I need to in my personal GitHub. So if you want to copy stuff from there, you certainly can. It's called ShopMate. It's kind of meant to be like a e-commerce back-end type thing. It's not actually going to be like useful for anything, but I think the core concepts, especially of data, is something that's like mostly agnostic that people will understand. Like I'm going to have products, and products have like a brand. The brand has a manufacturer, and you make an order that has like one or more like products. So it's a thing that most people can understand. I had a previous demo project but it was very like IT orientated, so if you didn't have like a networking background, you'd probably be like, oh, what the hell is this thing going on? So anyway, this is just gonna be like a new thing for like future tutorials and how-tos and like showing how to use like Django concepts. So Joe, if you want to copy models from there, that's exactly what I'm gonna be doing. I just have on my notepad thing here. So that said, now that you know it's like an e-commerce back thing, I'm gonna copy in 3 models, and I'm going to basically just because I don't want to like type all this out, and in the interest of time, I'm going to copy those into, where's my models.py here? My models.py for app1. And I'll just walk through what some of these are. So like I said, at the high level, we have a brand. A brand has a reference to a manufacturer. So a manufacturer can have multiple brands, and each brand can also have a product. I'm going to not use attributes right now, just to keep it simple. And this is just so you can see that there's a hierarchy, right? So I don't want to make it too complex, but I don't want to make it too simple as well. Product has a foreign key to brand, and brand has a foreign key to manufacturer. Let me pause right there just to see if any of that was confusing or if I went too fast.
I understood foreign key.
Okay, that's good.
You said brand, product, and manufacturer?
Yeah, so we'll go 3 models.
They're kind of like classes.
So yes, these literally are classes.
Okay.
So let's like start with, I wanted to put that not in that spot.
Oh, it says class. Look at that.
Yes, so the model is the Python representation of the actual database. So each class will create a database table, and each of these fields will become columns of that database table.
Okay.
Got it?
Yeah, totally with you now.
Right. So one of the great things about Django ORM is it is very like English centric. So even if you're not like a database guru or anything, you say, oh, I have a name field, and that's a char field. Okay, great. I have in this case, I have an enable, and that's like a Boolean. One thing to note is that by default, it does give you the primary key as an integer, like an auto-incrementing integer, so you don't need to add that. If you want to have your own special thing, like I have down here for product, you just add this parameter. This is going to be foreign key equals true, and I'm going to have a skew, which is just, I'm going to override and make a skew-like thing instead of just having an auto-incrementing integer.
And are these flat? Or are they going to write them to a different? It's all flat database, right?
No, the SQLite is a real database.
No, but I mean, they're not. Are you doing it? Are you writing them relationally? I don't know if I'm asking it right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if it foreign key is the relation.
Okay, so it's writing separate. Okay, so
We'll
not
have
the
3
code
tables.
part. I'm in the database here. I'm trying to build up my head here. SQLite writes everything to a text file. Is that, or is it an actual?
No,
running,
it is not.
running
Yeah,
agent?
that's an actual database. It's not a flat file.
Okay. All right.
It wants you to think it's an interface. I'm just kidding. That's not helpful.
I've not worked with it.
I'll say this
I know
much.
my SQL.
I can go in here
Oh, okay, there
into
you go.
SQLite.
Yeah.
It has a SQLite reader. We have them. There's all these other things from the other packages we built in, but you can see tables, or you can see columns and rows per table. So these are all the tables. Some of them got created for us by that initial migration. And as soon as we create these ones, we will see.
So each class is a table.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Took me a minute.
Okay, and that's probably enough to get going. So to do that, we're going to, so I'm going to save that, is the manage command called make migrations, and you give it the app name, and this will...
I'm the bar, so I understand everyone else.
Oh, and this totally blew up because we forgot to do something. So in our settings file, if you remember when I went through that probably too quickly, we have all of these installed apps. Since we created an app, I need to add app 1 to that so that we can actually do Django things with that. So now I should be able to do my make migrations commands. And this make migrations basically just writes a Python file that is the instructions for the database to do this. And it'll say, I'm going to create this model and whatnot. And if I do the manage migrate command, it'll actually write to the database. So as soon as this is done, we should be able to go back to our SQLite and see that we have some new things here. And you'll see that they are prefixed by the app name, like app underscore manufacturer, for example, and you can see the columns. There's no data in there yet, but you can see that these exist.
So migrate is pushing a change time now to the SQLite server.
Exactly.
Right, but only to the server when you hit migrate. You're not
Yes.
actually updating the rest of the app. It's only to the server itself.
So migrate only does database.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fully your database. Yeah, there's nothing else in the app to
And-
upgrade.
And migrate's the only thing that pushes a change that persists, right?
Well, what do you mean persists? It's
Like,
the only
when
thing
you,
that
when you
pushes
update
it.
the rest of the app, when you're working on the app,
Mhm.
you're not actually changing unless you add a migrate command and actually push a migration through.
So the migration command will only update the database itself. There's other things in the app to update, your templates or your views or whatnot. That's all done in code.
Are you getting at like if he updates like one of the models and saves it, it hasn't actually affected the database?
Right, until actually push with the migration.
Correct.
Okay.
So like normally, like if this is in production or like an actual deployed thing, you will have somewhere in like in your startup script, for example, a command that does this migrate.
Mhm.
And if you don't, then you'll have like the old schema.
Okay.
Is there oh, sorry. You can continue.
I'm just not as familiar as SQLite as I should be.
Yeah, so and that's also not an SQLite thing. So this will be exactly the same if you're using Postgres or Oracle or MySQL or whatever.
Okay.
The whole point of like using the ORM is that it's database agnostic. So I can do everything here and like do local with SQLite, and if like I'm using Postgres in production, for example, it'll operate the same way.
How are you able to see the tables right there in VS Code? Is there an extension that you're using?
Oh, to see this SQLite?
Yeah,
Yes.
because usually I like drag to like something else, like a totally like SQLite Studio.
Yeah, and if you had SQLite Studio or another thing, you could see the tables there
Yeah,
as
but
well.
this looks
Yeah.
easier though, because you're right there. In
Yeah, it's right there. It's pretty easy. And it's a VS Code plugin. I don't remember which one.
Yeah.
But it's in the
Yeah.
in the marketplace. Cool. Sweet. So that's got us some structure in there. So the next thing we want to do is let me run the server again. And go back to here. So we would hope that now that we have that set up, we can go and at least go into the admin interface and see some stuff. But we don't because we haven't created it yet. That's what's inside my app, this admin file does. And right now it's blank. So you can basically set up how you want stuff in the admin to be displayed. Luckily, to save us some time, I have a command for that called create admin, and you give it the app name, and that'll write everything inside there that you need. So you see that these just
Where's that
populated
from?
with stuff. That's from a package I have called Handy Helpers. So it's already installed. So just run that command with your app name, and you'll get all this stuff. So now if I try to run server again, and let me flip over here. So you notice like each one of these, if you weren't aware, is basically an app in Django. So there's an authentication app, AutoLog's another app I use. So if I refresh this, we should have one more, and we do. And this is the 3 models that we created. So if I went in here, we can actually start adding data. So if I wanted to like add a manufacturer, for example, I can go in here and say menu 1 or something, and now I have a piece of data. So I think things concepts work a lot better when you actually have data or meaningful data to use. Right now we don't. Normally I would write a script, and in most of my projects I do, to like populate meaningful type data in there. In the interest of time, I won't do that, but we will go into the Django shell. So if you weren't aware that Django does have a shell, and there's another third-party tool I'm using called Django Extensions, which gives you this thing called Shell Plus, which is super handy because it basically just imports everything for you. So all these things that you may want to do, including all of your models, will be right there. And let me give you a quick example of like how some of this stuff works. Can I copy and paste from my model so I don't have to like type it wrong? No. So if I do manufacturer, for example, the syntax is objects and then thing, or like verb, for example. So I want to do create, I can do a name equals menu 2, for example, and this will create a record and objects, sorry, that needs to be plural, and that creates an entry in there. So this is basically a wrapper for all SQL commands. You never have to write a line of SQL if you don't want to. In the interest of time and putting in more data, I will show you another package that I use mostly for unit testing because it creates gobbledygook, and you'll see that in seconds. By imports, no, I want to.
Is it factory boy?
Yeah, no. This is more. So you're thinking factory. So this is a bakery.
This is new to me.
This is new. So since you've used factories, you can tell me if you like factories more or if you like bakery more. So I'm importing baker, and I can do a command called baker make, and you give it basically the app name and the model, and the number after it is optional. It'll create one by default. But if I do this, it will create. You'll see that it created 3 products. But remember, product has a relation to brand, brand has a relation to manufacturer. So this actually created all of those for you with one simple command. So if I go back out and do a run server again, so we can see in our admin interface here, we have basically all of things. So this bakery looks at the rules of the model. Like in this case, the name is like what, a chart field of like 32 or whatever. So it just fills it all up. So it's not meaningful stuff, but you can see that there's entries there, and it's something that I use routinely for unit tests. But for now, we'll just use the five-player thing. So if I look at, we have products, we have manufacturers, and we have brands. All that got created with like one simple command.
And that's to avoid a null condition with just piping random chars into it.
You can pipe random chars in it. I mean, it's all legal based
But I
on the
mean,
rules.
you're not accepting a null value within manufacturer.
No. So but that has nothing to do with like the way that I'm putting data into it. That has to do with like the setup of your model. So if I wanted to allow a null, I'd have to put like a null equals true to allow like a null.
But it's just automatically not accepting one and piping in.
Yeah, it knows that it can't be null.
Okay.
So it creates something for you.
Perfect.
There are a couple options you can do with that. Like instead of having it just generate complete gobbledygook, you can give it like, if I was creating a brand, I can give it like a known manufacturer. And there's also an option to like fill optional. So if any fields were nullable, you can tell it by default it will not fill the null fields, but you can tell it to fill the null fields if that's something you want. So it's completely flexible.
It's actually really neat. I've never seen that. We
Baker?
just test on live users.
Yeah, that's how I do all my unit testing. Is instead of having like a static set of like known data or like building a factory. So like one of the great things about like the Django like test framework in there is it creates a database for you that's run at the time of unit test and destroys it like when you're done. So you can do like real things. So I always populate it with like real type data there that I just generate on demand with like a command as simple as that, instead of having to maintain additional code for like factories and fixtures and all that kind of stuff.
Have you used Mixer before?
Mixer? I don't think I have.
It's probably more similar to this than Factory Boy.
Yeah.
You can do like basically a very similar where you like give it the name of, or the string like name of your model, and you do .blend, and it'll either just pick like default values for you, or you can like override it and like tell it, okay, for this field I want this value, but the rest it'll just kind of pick something.
Sweet.
Yeah.
If you say there's a carving knife, I'm done.
Carving.
Yeah, there's baker, mixer.
Oh. Oh, that is
bowl.
funny. Yeah.
And you see a theme here coming
Spatula.
on, right? Yeah.
So you like this though, the
Baker? Yeah.
Baker?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like
I
something.
haven't heard of this one before.
Looks cool. I like it.
Well, you've done factories before. Like, what do you for your unit tests, right? What do you think is more efficient?
I haven't really done much with Factory Boy specifically. So the project I was on before was using Mixer, which is probably pretty similar to this. And the one, it was like a double-edged sword. Like we would end up with like sort of this explosion of like one-off mixers in every test, and then it could become like really hard to sort of refactor the tests as the code changed. But we also have like a root conf test.py, which had like sort of a top level like default like functions that kind of get spat back like basically a single instance of each model from every app, and that could also be really difficult to work with. So I don't know. I don't think it was a problem with the tool. I think it was just the way the tests were set up was sometimes hard to work with.
Well, how much time do we have? So if we have time, I will show you an easier way.
We're at 7:01.
Okay. So are we an hour? Or are we 2 hours? Are we until people get bored, or
Probably like an hour and a half.
Okay.
The presentation talks.
got it? Okay. So I'm
I
hearing.
mean, we've gone as far as 2 before, but I feel like that was kind of stretching it.
Gotcha. So I mean, is everyone cool to continue, or are you like done with this or more?
No.
Okay,
Good.
let's do more. So we have models. So the next thing I want to do is create some views. So views, remember, are the things that render an output. So we want to see an actual like web page, for example, of a thing. So I don't need admin anymore. Probably don't need settings anymore. Why is models not saved? So in general, I kind of see like views or web pages in as a couple different categories, right? Usually you will, especially in terms of like data and databases, you want to like list all the things, or you want to see specific details on one of the things, or you might have something custom. Same thing with APIs, right? That's why you have like, your list, your get, your retrieve, your detail and whatnot. So I break those down into like detail views and list views. So if I go into my GUI, first thing I want to do is import my models. So I have a space there, so I'll comment it out. So we'll put that back in. Manufacturer and products, and we'll just do one for now. And I have examples here that I put into the app template, so you kind of have those ready to go. I'm just going to uncomment them and put them for we'll use brands, just because I'm going in alphabetical order. So if I'm going to have basically a view that says list brands, which will list all the brands, and detail brands, which will give us a detail page for a specific brand. So, okay, hopefully that makes sense so far. What you'll see in here is you have a very small set of code, and these are all class-based views. So Django does provide function-based views and class-based views. So I guess I'll say this once and hopefully not upset people. It's 2023. Python is a class or an object-oriented language. Use class-based for the most things. It'll probably save you a ton of code and headaches down the road. Although you can totally use functions if you want, but don't.
So HTML on the table, we missed the L.
Oh, actually, we didn't.
Oh.
So in HTML world, HTM and HTML are both valid extensions.
Okay.
This is like a David thing, not like a convention thing, but I've adopted using both, mostly if I have a partial or something that's not the main thing rendered, I use an HTM. If it is the main thing rendered, I use HTML. So in this case, and this will make sense in a minute, I have like because it is a class-based view, I'm inheriting a lot of code that does things for me, that creates the main HTML, and I'm only adding one little thing to that, which will be this table, which is an HTML. So that's just the convention I do to keep track of like how things are organized. So it's very much on purpose.
Okay.
So we need to make these HTML files, so I do have templates set up, and I have examples of those that I'll cut and paste in the interest of time. So I'm going to just rename that to brands. And we'll see here that this has some HTML, and it lists basically just creates an HTML table, not to make things even more complicated because we have database tables and whatnot, but an HTML is just going to be a table view. Again, this is using a bootstrap thing that I use regularly, so I'm just going to add a couple of things to that. Let me split this view, and I promise this will make sense in a second. Let me close some things because I don't have a lot of screen space here. So even if you're not an HTML person, you don't fully understand like all the things that are going on, just know that in this view, I want to render things that are in my brand model, right? So if I can see that I have 3 fields here, then I probably want to put those in here. I already have name and a couple timestamps. So I know that if I just like copy and paste this and follow the pattern, we're going to get something that mostly works. So I'm going to put in manufacturer and enabled, and I promise if this isn't making sense, it will as soon as it renders.
This is very similar to PHP.
Yeah, so any...
I actually
take that back.
That is so insulting.
Yeah, I don't know if he was going to offend someone. I'm going to make sure it's totally offended, but I actually understand this part.
Yeah, so basically any like MVC type framework is going to have very similar concepts. So if you understand like the base concepts of one, you're going to understand the base concepts of most of them. And that's probably enough to get going.
Usually before I say something like that, I make sure I have 2 X's.
Yeah, as long as you don't start quoting Ruby or Perl, I think we're good. Any Perl fans in the house? No, good.
I can't even read Perl.
We won't go there. So I'm going to do the same thing for my detail page. So I already have an example of that provided by my templates. So I'm just going to call this branch, I guess. And I'm just going to leave this one blank in the interest of time. So I just want the things to actually work. So now we have a view which will render an HTML page. The next thing we need is just a way to reference it. And to reference it, that's where URLs come in. So remember, URLs are things that link an endpoint to a view. So in my URLs here, I do have some things ready to go. So I'm just going to do a little copy pasta. And since my views are already imported, come on, VS Code. I'm going to make a list view, literally called list brands. Oops, if I can type it right. And I will paste that here, and I will call that to list brands.
The tilde at the end is on.
Oh, no, we don't want that. Okay. List. Did I not call that? I'd like to keep that plural, so I should put that S in there. Okay, so let me. I lost my space. Let's go away here. So does that make sense? So URLs is basically a list of paths, and this is the thing that it links to. One thing that might be confusing is you'll see list branch in there twice. That's because the first parameter here is the thing that actually gets typed into the web browser, or if we're calling an API, the actual path to that. The second is a name that can be used in templates as a shortcut. So don't worry about that. I tend to keep these the same. I think that makes things a whole lot easier. I've seen people use all kinds of different naming conventions, and it just causes confusion. Like if you're starting out, or just keep them the same, it'll save you headaches down the line. Just trust me on that one. And I'm going to do the same thing for my detail page, except it's not my model. And you will see one thing different with the detail path. This has another parameter, and that's basically the primary key, which in this case is just an integer. So you need that to be able to reference a specific record. So we have 10 in our database right now, so that's literally lists, or in this case it'll be detail brand 1, brand 2, or whatnot. It's going to be detail brand. So I think all of that will work, and I just want to make sure that I have my absolutes there. And that should work. All right, so before we run this again, any confusion as I went through that maybe too quickly? Or you want to see stuff we can, or we actually want to see stuff? Let's run it. Manage server, or manage pi run server, and this will get us back to our websites. And I'm going to go to app 1, this branch, and so we can't get to where we need to go because we've got to do one thing. If you remember from the beginning, Django is a collection of apps within a project. So there's actually a project level URL. So to be able to get to things into our app, I need to add this, which will basically just say anytime I go to this part of a URL, it'll forward me to the other URLs for all the stuff within that app. So if we had multiple apps, you just add more here to be able to reach that.
Was that commented out?
Yeah.
Is that just how it comes?
That's how I put it in the template, or in the project template. Yeah. So if I do this again, hopefully we will see something that works, and we don't because I named it wrong.
We got a new error.
I got a new error. So I can't find that. That says I can't find the template because I called it brand, or should have called it brand.
New errors are progress.
New errors are progress. I'll always take new errors, so I expect that will probably work now. And it won't. What happens? Let's see. Something didn't render right. It didn't have a table. This brands table, that should all I expect that would all work. Let's see what I did wrong.
Oh, it's
Oh,
my app
yeah.
instead of app 1.
Correct. And that's wrong. So this is app 1. Good eyes. That's what PRs are for. Okay. Let's try this again. Alright, so now we have like a table, and again, this is all from inherited code except for the actual table itself. This is a thing called Bootstrap table because I'm using Bootstrap as like the front end type thing. It gives you a couple cool stuffs like you can filter columns if you want. You can go and turn off pagination or front end pagination at least, and you can turn off different fields or different columns. So just some stuff you get for free. Very quick way to make like a nice meaningful table. If we did the rest of the code right, I should be able to click on one of these very aptly mentioned or named brands and go to a brand detail page, which we do have. It just has a brand title and everything else blank, so we didn't build that out. But that's enough to kind of just show how most of that would work. Again, you have a database of stuff. You want a list page to list all the things, and you want a detail page to give specific details on an individual record.
And that would just give you the UPC list for everything under that brand.
If you want to put it in, yes.
Yeah.
Do you use like Django filter to add like easy filtering for?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I use that mostly on the APIs. I do have a specific thing here that has filters without needing filter sets, although I'll probably move to filter sets. So if I did something like name contains, I don't know, HU, like this one has an HU, for example, it'll give you a filter of only those things that have that. So you have that built out without having to create a filter set.
Is that part of your handy helper
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing to say is that it actually works really great for most filtering. It does not, however, work for negative filtering. So if I wanted the inverse of that, it doesn't do that, but filter sets will. Although at one point I might update it to do more things.
Filter by query frames mixer.
Yes. Sweet. Okay, so that's a good overview of GUI-ish stuff. Do we want to keep going and see an API?
I'd see that. Yeah.
All right, so I think everyone's probably like up to APIs. So for APIs, my go-to is Django REST framework. It's probably like the most used one in like the Python world, especially the Django world. There are many different ways to make an API, especially in Django. So I want to show you, maybe we'll start with like the most simplest possible type of thing you can do, and then show why you might want to use a framework in addition to the Django framework to do all that kind of stuff. So I do have a couple examples available that I'm going to copy and paste them here. So if you remember from our views, I separated out GUI and REST. So I'm going to go ahead and put a couple views in REST and show you what that's all about. So I think we'll just use brand as an example. We're going to copy and paste some code here. So sorry, Joe, if you're like typing this all out, but I promise this one is like a little bit short. So one of the things that you can do is like Django has all of these different types of like response objects, including one literally called JSON response. So one could argue that if you're returning a JSON response, hey, you have an API now, right? Even though you might want some other stuff in the API. So the simplest possible way to have an API, especially one with no data, is probably something like this. I'm going to do a get, no post, no put, none of that stuff, and just return something that's valid JSON. So this will totally work. It's completely useless, of course, unless you really wanted something that just sends a static message. But that will totally work.
All my APIs are 2 lines.
Yeah, sweet.
Keeps it simple.
Yeah, gotta keep that stuff simple.
What's the language you said? Can't remember the
PHP.
name. Yeah, PHP.
Yeah.
Sure you can, but why would you want it?
I mean, Laravel's still a thing. It still has Steam. WordPress is all PHP.
Well, yeah.
It still exists. I mean, what, 30-40% of the internet is WordPress
40.
still?
An
40?
argument based on CRUD is not a good argument. COBOL still exists.
That's true. Well, I mean,
we actually use COBOL.
Yeah.
That's pretty rough.
That's not an argument for PHP though.
No. It was just where I worked. That's what they wanted. I was innocent in the whole thing.
All right, so one, still very simple, but slightly less simple, one that has actual data. If I wanted to like pull some data, again, it's brand objects all. This will give me all the brands going in the database. No filtering, no fancy stuff, anything like that. There's an option to like return, it's called values list, give me just the values that I want, like for example, ID and name. And you can just put that in a JSON response as data. So that's probably one of the simplest ways I can think of to have a somewhat meaningful API. Well, this will give you all the things in the database, at least with very, very simple code. No bells and whistles with this. None of the things that you would normally want, like authentication, authorization, pagination control, filtering, like any of that. But this will work. If we want to see an example of that working, all I have to do is basically make sure that I have that available in my URLs. So if I open, maybe on the side, I'll open those URLs, then we can actually, I'm going to copy and paste a couple things here. And there's that indentation, so I just need a path to that, and if I call this like a simple list, for example, and this one is not going to be GUI, it's going to be REST dot simple JSON or simplest JSON, and then I do that again for one that is maybe simple instead of simplest. And this one will just be simple JSON is what I call it, right? So this should theoretically work. If I went to slash app1, then what do I call that? Simple. That should give us data. So there's some JSON data. If I did simplest, which is the simplest one, that's just a JSON message. So that totally works. Yay, called an API, and I would say that those are very, very not useful APIs, but if you wanted the quickest and dirtiest way to do something as an API in Django, that would probably serve you well. That said, now that we know how to do it, I would say don't ever do that. The way that you want to do that, probably to have meaningful, robust, and performant APIs, is to use an additional framework. Again, you don't have to. You can do stuff like this and even expand on it and do all kinds of things inside there to make stuff happen the way you want stuff to happen. But Django REST framework and other things, there's a couple other like frameworks out there like Ninja and kind of want to say there's like 3.
Like Ninja.
You like
It's
Ninja?
definitely not. Its feature paired, like it's not nearly as big as DRF.
It's not. The one thing I find interesting about Ninja is like, especially like, oh, we don't use like serializers and stuff. We use schemas, and then schemas really became like a serializer. It's like almost DRF like. If you like things like Flask and Fast API, where you have all these like decorators on top of decorators and gobbledygook and a million different things and like one file and it's all chaos, you'll probably like Ninja. Yeah, that said, you could probably understand like my feelings towards that. DRF's tried and true. It's been around for like years and years and years, and it's used, and I literally see it on like job descriptions for people actually hiring. I've never seen Ninja on a job description.
I haven't either.
Not to say there's anything wrong with that, but it's definitely DRF's the way to go. So DRF divides things into a couple different categories. So you have a view and you have a serializer. So a view, like we just saw, that renders an output. A serializer determines like what should be returned, like what the actual data looks like. So if you want to like rename a field, for example, or add something from somewhere else, like an additional related field, or control data coming in for validation purposes, if you're doing like a post or a put or a patch, it can do all of those things. Serializers are great. Definitely part of how DRF is supposed to work. I would say even more important is the ability to filter your APIs. So not part of DRF, but compatible to it is a concept called filter sets, which determines like how your data can be filtered coming in. So if we looked at something like, hey, this is great, it gives us all the brands, there's probably not a real world use case where you want to get like all the rows of a data. You want to get things created between certain dates or created by a person or of a status of X or whatever else is applicable to like the schema of your data. So filter sets let you do that. So let's look at an example of a filter set, and then we will tie it into an actual DRF view. And but by the way, also like while like these things gave us simple JSON, they're not innately compatible with things like OpenAPI spec and Swagger and whatnot. So even though this will totally work, this will not show up on our Swagger interface. Anything that's a DRF view set or API view, we'll be using view sets, will be automatically added to our Swagger. And I'll show you an example of that. So first things, I'm going to create a filter sets. And I have a filter sets file right here. I guess first I need to import my models, brand, and manufacturer, and product. So it's a very simple concept, although it sounds like it could be confusing, but really a filter set is just a mapping of a field to a lookup expression. And there are a lot of different lookup expressions that you can use, especially when it comes to things like dates and whatnot. So some things that I think do work out of the box is like equality. So I can say name equals blah, but I can't see name contains blah plus something else, right? Filter sets will allow you to do that. So in this case, I'm defining my model and the fields that I want. This is the field on one side, and this is the lookup expression. Dunder all is a shortcut for give me all the things. If you wanted to set these specifically, you can, instead of giving it a dictionary of your things here, you can give it a list of like, hey, maybe I only want to do exact equality or greater than or something. You could do that. I would say, especially if you're working on like internal apps and things like that, give all the fields unless you have a specific reason not to. And there probably are some specific reasons not to, especially with date fields, but for now, we're going to use everything. So this will allow our brand to be filtered on everything except related stuff because we haven't put in like the related fields yet. So that will give us that should work just as an example there. The next thing we want to do is add a serializer. So again, I will need to add my models because everything revolves around models. So I'll get my brand in there, manufacturer, and products, although I don't think we'll use all this. And I'll do a little bit of copy pasta again. Here. And just again, very simple definition, or here I'm just saying what fields should be returned. So if you wanted to turn something off, say, hey, I don't want to show that in my API, you can literally just comment it out, and that's all you need to do. And every API or every call to an API, whether it be like a list or a get, will only include this. Right now, we'll include everything. But again, if you wanted to have additional things like related fields and whatnot, there's some stuff you can do to make that happen as well. But for now, we will just keep that simple. And lastly, what I need to do is actually create my view sets. So again, this follows Python object-oriented rules and very little code. Literally, these are the only lines, 3 lines you wanted if you wanted to include your model in your queries instead of having it broken out. That's all you need to make a very robust with authentication, like with pagination control, like with backends and filtering, all that kind of stuff, API. I do need to import my serializers and my filters though. So I'll get my brand serializer here, and I will get my brand filter here. Filter sets. Sweet. So that should make all of those things work. I do need to make one addition to my URLs. So DRF uses something called a router to route to all the view sets. So that's what I'm doing here. So you notice that that is slightly different than the rest of my URLs. This is going to be my brand view sets. The router will handle things like understanding what method type is coming in and making sure the appropriate action happens. So if you're doing a list versus get versus post, patch, head, whatever, it does all that for you, unless you want to specifically override it. So just with that, that should be enough to make these work. So let's take a look and see if it's running. So I'll run server again. No errors. Okay, that's a good thing. Let's put this in here. So first of all, if I go back to my Swagger page, we can now see that we have all of these methods available, and that works, and Swagger is already there, generated automatically for you. I'm going to go into my DRF page because I just like that one better, and we'll see that we have a brand here. So to have something, let me zoom in a little bit for you guys. So if you have, anytime you create a route, which is the thing we just put in right here, it'll show up here for you and just has this nice browsable interface. And you can see that we have all of our records. So with that, we should be able to do some more interesting things. So first off, I want to change this, like referencing a foreign key related object by its ID is not overly useful. So one way that we can fix that is in our serializer, because remember serializer determines the presentation of that, and they have something here for us called string related field that will replace that with whatever the return value or format is, and you do that in a model. You can say like, string related is going to be, I think in this case we called it name. So if I refresh this, instead of having something completely unuseful like the ID, we have now the manufacturer name, which, well, we have horrible names, but you can see that that's all there. Let me pause there before I show you cool stuff to see if there's any questions on how those APIs work.
That's pretty cool.
Sweet. All right, so you don't know it yet, but we actually have some cool things built in and available to us. Well, at least I think they're cool. Tell me what you think. So by default, this is like the DRF provided like view. If I wanted to say JSON, this is how it's normally going to look to the real world. And those are determined by something called a renderer. So I added an additional one in here just because I think it's useful. That is an Excel renderer. So if in this case, if I click it here, or if you did like a curl dash output and then a file name, you would be able to like actually download a file. In this case, it's an Excel file that has all of my data already for me in Excel format. And if you want to make a CSV renderer or a text renderer or something like that, then that's available too. Again, since all the data is in the database, you can output it to however you want. You can also see here that we already have pagination involved. We only have 10 rows, and I think I have it default set to 100. You can change that in settings or pass it into your environment variable if you want to have a specific number of sets in your pagination. So that's another thing that you just kind of get there for free. Another thing that's available, not out of DRF specifically, but under this, you might have noticed that I'm using a non-standard serializer base class called flex field. Sure, you ever use that?
I was looking at it though.
Okay, so you might see where this is going. So this gives us a couple additional capabilities that your consumer can use, such as defining the fields that you want. So if I only wanted 2 fields, for example, I can now reduce the size of my payload and only have those 2 fields of all the rows like presented. I can also do the exact opposites, omit, I think, to have everything except those 2. So if you want to explicitly not have certain data in there, very easy way, all that command and control is available for you, like basically out of the box following these templates.
Can you show? There's something about like is expanded or like expand.
Yes. Is that something you saw in the documentation, or is that you saw commented out here?
You had it commented out.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Okay. So I will have to create an additional serializer for manufacturer. So let me do that real quick. So I'm just going to basically copy and paste because it's almost the same. So we're going to make another serializer for manufacturer. If I spelled that right. And this is going to be based on our, we won't need this one anymore. It's not going to be brand, it's going to be for these 2 lines and copy there. And now I just need to define the fields in manufacturer, which I think are everything except this. So now we have a second serializer. So what expandable fields does is reference this serializer to know what should be available for manufacturer. So if that all works, what you can do now, so you see that our manufacturer, we're just returning the name, basically, before returning just the ID. But we know that that's a whole object of itself. So if I expand that as a parameter, now I'm able to like get the entire contents of that object as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the code for a sec?
Yeah.
Can you scroll to the scroll down?
Mm-hmm.
It's showing. So you have model though. The model is still the brand.
Oh, yeah. That should be manufacturer.
But it
Luckily,
still works.
it still works because it still works because all these field names are the same.
Oh, I
So
see.
in both the brand and the manufacturer model, I have created that and updated that and name and ID and an enabled.
Is
Interesting.
it pulled from a different table?
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But just luckily the fields were named. So the wrong date, we couldn't tell because it's all like gobbledygooky names, right? So
Right.
this
No,
should
yeah, how would
it
you
should
know?
technically change. I don't even know if it did.
Is there? This is slightly related, but is there a way for the bakery thing to get it to either out of the box or writing your own code or maybe a third-party extension on that third-party extension to get it to not just generate like trash for the
Yes.
char fields?
Yes, you can give real values to any field you want.
But like there's one package that'll use like names, like it just generates like a first and
Yeah,
last
Faker.
name. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Can you get it to like do that out of the box?
That I don't know. So when you do your baker make, you can give like name equals blah or any other field that exists in the model. I mean, I guess you could use name equals faker make dot first name or whatever if you wanted just to make up something.
I guess
but
you write like a little wrapper function that maybe like
Yeah.
does that.
you should be able to call a function. I bet you can do that.
It would make sense to be able to have a fake name list or something like that and just call it
Yeah.
a random fake name list.
Yeah, I've done that before, but again, if I'm doing that especially for unit tests, I do not care what that value is. I care that whatever that value is follows the rule of the model. So if I put Jane Doe versus John Smith, it's irrelevant like the test. So there may or may not be use case for doing
Lots
that.
of lists you can get on the dark web.
Oh yeah, if only we knew somebody who probably has good access to that, right?
Yeah, who would do that?
Have you been watching Kilkenny? No. The dark web.
Oh,
They all echo it.
Cool. So let me pause there. So we have an example of a GUI, an example of an API, a couple cool things we can do with said APIs and whatnot. Is there any specific things you guys would like to see or just chat about? Or
Actually, Pigwalker, if you want to go into that a little bit more.
I
Just-
could try.
Just talk about what are you using it for?
I'm not.
You're not yet. What do you see it being useful for? Said that way, because you see value in it.
Yeah, so definitely I've known plenty of people that do like analytics and whatnot. So one thing that I want to do is make that available just like by default for specific models that I have. So in this case, like for example, we have like brand and products. So like literally click on like, hey, analyze brands and have like all the fields in there that I want. So a consumer of that can like, put those in the right way, however it might be meaningful. I have no idea how it might be meaningful, but if you want to say, hey, brands created by date or how many sales per thing or something like that. So like I'm not like the data scientist or like the analyst. I would say like my intent is to make everything that might be needed available for how they would want to consume it. And I do see it plenty of times like, oh, how do we get the data out of one thing and into another? Well, what if you didn't? Or if you just do it all in one like system? Like the data is already in the system. Let's just give you that view to do the analysis that you need.
When we're talking about the coffee and code, so I think it comes about in different approaches, but like my approach that I've been using before is our software tends to be role-based software.
Mm-hmm.
You buy the software needed for the role that you're in because it gives you only the stuff that you need and not the extra stuff. Because if you're doing data science research, you want the database. You don't want anything in between you and the database. You actually want to play with the actual database. And so you have to learn the code in order to manipulate the database to give you back what you want to see. If you are a data scientist and you're creating glossy magazine stuff, you don't want any of that stuff. You're not doing anything new. You want to package it in a way that can be digested by somebody else. So you want different views that are almost presets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And
that's what we were talking about with Tableau, is that Tableau is more on the flashy, glossy side and less on the dirty.
yeah,
data
so
side.
I have built, like interface type things like that, and I would even argue if I'm looking at my serializer, for example, you could filter out like what fields can be seen based on RBAC and things like that. And one of the uses that I found for stuff like having this like field control, where it's like, okay, one person can see all the stuff and another person can only see field equals name and whatnot. And even if there was like using this or exporting the data, like remember when I showed you this like Excel thing, that the filter applies to that as well. So if somebody wants to like get this, now I have an Excel file of like only those two. Oh, shit, I lied to you. That has, oh wait, no, maybe, no, it does. It's just blank. It's just blank. So that's probably a bug in the exporter where you would think these should be blank, or just the column shouldn't exist. But so that is that. But the point is, like, if you want to have a subset of data, there's definitely ways, like via RBAC and other things, to be able to control that. And again, I don't know who needs what, but what I want to do, like as a developer, is make sure that whatever combinations of like filtering and like limiting or whatnot, the ability to do it via code is there. And like if there's a consumer of this API, for example, they can hit this just like that, and another consumer might have different field access and that kind of thing.
We had things like that for a budget software, because marketing could never look at the raw budget. They can only look at the release budget, because otherwise they run into R&D, and then marketing now has access to R&D's stuff that they're working on, which means marketing is now telling everybody what R&D is doing. So there's reasons for those rules to come in there. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
To be able to do role-based.
Yeah, you can. And again, like all of these things, especially in Django, are pluggable. So you don't really get roles, you get groups. But if you want something more extensive, you can definitely like outsource. I don't want to say outsource, but there's external means of doing things for like identity management that'll give you the policies, permissions, groups, roles, all those bells and whistles. And there's a number of things that plug into that. Like you can OAuth backend or LDAP and all these things. They're all compatible. You can use all that with there. LDAP works
I
great.
shudder when I hear LDAP. I spend far too much time of my life messing with LDAP.
I will say when I was at Box, everything was LDAP, and we had a number of like Django projects, and there's like Pi LDAP and I think Django LDAP, and it's like literally a couple of lines of configuration in your settings file, and it imports all the groups automatically in the background almost instantly, and you can do all your RBAC like on the Django side, just like, oh, are you in group blah, and then control.
So is it creating like rows in your database backed by the LDAP groups, or is it just reaching out to, when you say it imports the groups, what do you
imports
mean?
the groups from LDAP. So LDAP is a source of truth, and it just copies over the groups into the Django user group table, and you can like use it as you wish from there.
So it's just like a snapshot of LDAP, but if the LDAP like groups and stuff get updated, does it update on the Django side too?
I want to say yes, although that's probably a configurable thing parameter.
I was actually going to ask like what you use for, do you just use what Django offers out of the box when doing like RBAC type stuff, or do you reach for specific packages?
Yeah, for the most part, I use what it has like out of the box. I think that works great, especially for something like where you do have like constants of groups. So like, again, when I was using LDAP, we had that. The previous company used Google workspaces, so it's just a matter of like importing like Google groups for that. If you're using, you want to use like a different like OAuth or like Amazon or like Azure or whatever, they all have their IAM, and you can like outsource that, throw in a mixin or something too, instead of use a local copy of a group, go out to an external server, do some kind of validation, then come back and say, oh, should Bob be able to see the submit button or whatever.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I have a one-on-one question.
Okay.
You're doing all this on your laptop. Now you have two servers, one's database and one is, production. When you publish this, obviously it's just gonna, are you just pointing to the database server for it to read and write?
Yes.
Now what happens when you do you need to have Django installed on the production server as well? Are there elements that it needs? Or wouldn't you just send it out there, is it just full-blown code that just runs?
So I would say it's mostly full-blown code. I think in today's world, this would all probably be Dockerized. I think everything I've done has been Dockerized for like the last 6 years at least. There was a time where it's like I literally had a physical server that would shell into and
Have
git
Nginx
pull
or
and then
Apache or-
restart Apache or Nginx or whatever, and
Okay.
that worked too. But no, you're going to be probably be building a container and pushing stuff out. And that's where something like these types of things would come into like your environment variables. If you notice that I have a database name, a database engine, and whatnot, and if you had your dev, prod, staging, whatever, you would have different variables for these, and those would get read in, and that's how you have your path to your database or any other third-party or external systems.
Sure, okay. Very good.
There's a lot of packages that I've learned about tonight.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
You got Baker and
Well, again, if you look at the TOML file, there's all kinds of stuff in here, and all of these packages have their own dependencies. So, a typical Python dependency,
This is turning into a node project.
Yeah.
Dependencies on dependencies on dependencies.
That's how modern things work. So yeah, that's the bulk of what I got. The only other thing I was thinking about showing is very, very beta, and probably exceeds 201. But if you're not completely burnt out, I will give you a demo. Otherwise, we can call it
Demo of secrets.
secrets.
Up to the group.
I like secrets.
All right, okay, let's do some secrets.
This is still going to YouTube?
Yeah, do I need to end it? Is this for in
No,
person? Okay.
No, that's fine. It's just okay. Where am I going?
Public secrets.
Yeah, public secrets. I want my settings. So there's another package that I'm working on. So if you notice, there's a lot of things that just follow patterns, follow convention. I'm a big person on standards and conventions. So that said, there's a way to get a lot of the stuff that I want done a lot easier. So I've been working on a code generator that does a lot of stuff to make my life easier. And I was going to show you an example of that, especially because we're talking about unit tests. So what I can do is automatically generate my unit tests based on all the information in the models. Basically, that's all you need to do almost everything if you really understand the innards and all the objects and all that kind of stuff. Again, it's very, very beta. But I will show you how that worked, and you can tell me if you think that's better than factories. So I'm going to.
Is your tool just for unit tests long term, or is it going to be for generating views and all sorts of stuff?
All the stuff.
Gotcha.
All the stuff. So I'm going to pip install. And this is just local, so you won't be able to actually do this yet until I get off. Just, I guess that's the latest one. So I'm just installing from another directory on my system, and I need my settings file because I'm going to add another app. And this is something I started working on before Copilot X came out. I was like, oh shit, do I even need this anymore? But I don't know, I thought it was cool. So I have this thing which again generates code for me. So I can give it a command and copy these here. Hopefully these still work. And what I'm attempting to do is create unit tests for my models that will end up living under here. So actually I think I need to add a app1, and let me go ahead and put a under init in there, so I think I'll need that, and see if I can paste that command, and may or may not blow. Okay, so it didn't blow up. Let me refresh this. So what we can see here is I just created unit tests based on using Baker and whatnot. So now I have all these tests that I can go. So if everything worked right, I should be able to just type PyTest and see stuff run, which, okay, kind of worked. Well, actually it did work, just coverage didn't work. And if I look at my coverage for that, by doing almost nothing, I have 95% code coverage of my app just with that.
Nice.
Wow. So I have basically right now the ability to generate that and some API stuff. So I'll show you one more.
Should auto launch Netflix after that.
It
All
should
that
be.
time saved.
So I will do one more to create filter sets, just to show you what extensive filter sets really should look like. Where did that create? App 1 generated filter sets. So we talked a little bit about filters. Earlier we just made one simple one. If I was making it very more robust, including all like the related fields, like here's brand, for example. It relates to manufacturer and it relates down to product, because product has like a relation to there. And this is what like a very extensive set of filters would look like, just as an example. So you can imagine if you had more than 3 models, writing all these out and making sure that you have all the things, especially for your related fields, on your filter sets, on your serializers, on your tests, all that stuff can be very, very involved. And this is just something that I'm working on to make it very easy.
That's pretty cool. There's a .NET tool sort of similar to this, which is actually made by IntelliTech, called Coalesce, and it basically like goes in and like you put most of your logic in just your models, like your business logic, and then it kind of like generates like your controllers and views and all sorts of other stuff. I'm not super familiar with it, but I was like, oh, it'd be cool to have something like that for Django.
Yeah, that's what we're working on. Because, you know, again, being able to say, hey, make a list view for a thing. If I'm using the same table, you might want a little bit of logic if you don't want to include something in like, you know, the HTML table column, but, you know, deleting 2 lines is pretty easy. But just having all that boilerplate covered for you can be very powerful.
So much quicker to erase than it is to add.
Right?
That's pretty slick.
And you could call it Coalesce Beta. So you can see how your
Well, I don't know. IntelliTech might have a copyright on that.
Uh-oh.
Coalesce Beta. I don't think there's a copyright. I did look. Django Coalesce is a thing already, though. Like
Yeah,
on
all the good names are taken,
If
right?
you do a coalesce, then you know.
They have to make it async.
It's the yellow pages, you know, method.
Oh, right.
Right?
But get at the top.
Yeah, get at the
Maybe
top.
it's
Yeah, put up like a bang or something.
How do you parse? Do you just like import and look at like? I'd be curious to see the code for how you're generating the code.
Oh, it's a mess. It's a mess. So just like, you know.
That's top secret.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll show you when they're not strings. Like, it'll show like how horrible that sometimes looks like. It can be a lot of code, but the Django objects, just like, you know, Python objects in general, are very involved. So if you look at like all the different classes and subclasses and subclub classes of things that actually make up a model, there's tons of stuff in there, including like all the relations, types, you know, field names, methods for like, you know, determining like primary, all this stuff. So for me, it was also just like an exercise of getting really familiar with like that deep dive of stuff that 90% of the world will never have to like understand. But it takes that, and then if you imagine the same thing for like views and view sets and all the other components that I want to make auto-generated things for, that including like permissions and like all this logic. Like we made very simple APIs, or we didn't even touch like permissions, and this is have like a get and a post and a list and all that. So when you have all that kind of stuff together, it gets rather involved. And the code is clunky because it wasn't really designed, like, you know, the Django objects weren't designed to be like picked apart easily necessarily for all that kind of stuff. But all the information, you know, just like you were saying with .NET, is in the model somewhere. It's just a question of like finding it.
Yeah.
Have you demoed this before?
No, I mentioned it to a previous employer that, hey, you know, I needed to have a very large project, and we're like, okay, well, let's, you know, take a week and try to get to, you know, across the board, get to 80% code coverage. That's not going to get done by hands. So I had mentioned that, you know, I was wanting to take this approach. I had some of it like somewhat developed, and like applying it to like a real thing was like, oh, well, is that a good way to go? They seemed rather like indifferent to how I got it done, unfortunately.
check.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
It's
let's
pretty
move-
slick.
That's all I got.
That's all,
Cool.
huh? I was expecting a bit more.
A bit more, huh? Well, if you're a glutton for punishment, we can make those other APIs.
Cool, thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
Fade to black. End stream. Now the after party can start.